I was never a perfect father, but I loved my children more than my own breath. When their mother died, my world shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I tried to hold our little family together with trembling hands. But grief changes people. It changed me. I became quieter, older, slower. My children grew impatient. They wanted to move forward, to live without the constant reminder of loss that I had become. One by one, they stopped visiting. My house turned silent, and I turned into a ghost they didn't want to remember. The last words my eldest son said to me still echo in my ears. "Dad, we can't do this anymore. You're just holding us back." They closed the door, and I never heard from them again.
For years, I lived in a small town far away.
I worked in a mechanic's shop, fixing broken cars while hiding my broken heart. I counted birthdays in silence and looked at the stars, wondering if my children ever looked up at the same sky. 9 years. 9 long years. My hair turned gray, my hands grew shaky, and my soul carried the weight of being forgotten. Then one day I saw her. My neighbor was scrolling through Facebook, showing her daughter's pictures, and there she was, my granddaughter. The baby I once held when she was just a few months old. She was all grown up, wearing a white dress, smiling in her engagement photo. I felt a sting in my chest. My little girl was getting married, and I was just a shadow from the past. I asked the neighbor quietly, "Do you know where this wedding is happening?" She told me the name of the city, the same one I once called home. For nights, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing my granddaughter's face in my dreams, and my heart whispered, "Go. Just see her once. No one has to know." I sold my old toolbox, packed a small bag, and took the first bus out of town. The ride was long, and every mile felt like walking through memories. When I reached the city, everything looked different, brighter, faster, colder. I found the wedding venue, a grand hall filled with laughter and music. I stood outside for a long time, afraid to walk in. My clothes were old, my shoes dusty. People would stare. But something inside me, maybe love, maybe pain, pushed me forward. As I stepped into the hall, the sound of music faded. My eyes searched the crowd until they found her. My granddaughter. Beautiful, radiant, and standing beside her, my son. The same man who told me to leave 9 years ago. He looked older too, with gray at his temples, but his eyes froze when they met mine. For a moment, everything stopped. The music, the laughter, the movement, all of it disappeared. Just a father and his son, separated by years of silence, now facing each other across a sea of people. He whispered something to his wife, and then he walked toward me. Every step he took felt heavier than the last. When he finally stood in front of me, he couldn't speak. Tears filled his eyes, and his lips trembled. He just said, "Dad." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. He reached out and hugged me, the kind of hug that carries all the words never said. The crowd fell silent, and I could see my granddaughter's confused face turning into realization. She ran toward us and threw her arms around me, crying, "Grandpa, I thought you were gone." In that moment, all the pain, all the years, all the loneliness melted away. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was home. They led me to a chair at the front, right next to the family. My son kept holding my hand, afraid I might disappear again. When my granddaughter walked down the aisle, she looked at me and smiled through tears. And as she said her vows, she paused, turned toward me, and said, "This is for you, Grandpa, for teaching us what forgiveness really means." The hall filled with soft applause, but all I could hear was my heart beating, this time not from pain, but from peace. That night, when everyone was gone, my son sat beside me outside the hall. The air was cold, and he said, "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness." I smiled and said, "Son, love isn't something you earn. It's something you give, even when it hurts." He cried again, and for the first time in 9 years, we watched the stars together, not as strangers, but as family. I didn't stay long after that. I went back to my quiet town, but something in me had changed. The silence didn't hurt anymore, because I knew I wasn't forgotten. Sometimes, when the night falls and the world is still, I close my eyes and hear my granddaughter's laughter. And I whisper to myself, "You did it, old man. You came back home." The next morning, I woke up in a small guest house near the wedding venue. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, warm and golden, like a soft blessing from above. For the first time in 9 years, I didn't feel like a stranger in the world. My son had insisted I stay, but I told him I needed some air, some space to breathe. As I walked through the town, I saw children playing, couples holding hands, and life moving on as it always does. But this time, I didn't feel left behind. My heart felt light. Still, memories came rushing back. The times I used to walk my own kids to school, how they'd run ahead laughing, their tiny hands waving at me. I remembered fixing my son's bike, cooking his favorite meal when he got his first job, the pride in his eyes when he became a father. Then the fights, the misunderstandings, the distance that kept growing. Love doesn't die, but sometimes it hides behind pain. That evening, my son came to see me again. He brought food, the same kind I used to cook for him when he was little. We sat together silently for a while. He finally said, "Dad, there's something you should know. When Mom passed away, I blamed you. I thought you gave up too easily. I thought you didn't fight hard enough." His voice trembled. "But when I saw you yesterday, I realized I was wrong all along." I looked at him and said softly, "We all make mistakes, son. What matters is that we come back." The days after the wedding were filled with moments I thought I'd never have again. My granddaughter insisted I stay longer. She showed me her wedding pictures, asked about my life, my memories, my regrets. She said, "Grandpa, Dad always told us you were a strong man, but I never understood what that meant until now." Her words hit me deeply. That night, I sat outside with a cup of tea and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. You gave me one more chance." Weeks passed, and slowly, I became part of their lives again. My son started visiting me more often. He introduced me to his friends, proudly saying, "This is my dad." I saw the guilt in his eyes fade a little each day. One afternoon, he told me, "Dad, I want you to move in with us. No more distance." I smiled and said, "Son, I appreciate it, but I've learned that sometimes love grows better when there's space to breathe. I'll visit often, but let me keep a little corner of my world too." He nodded with tears in his eyes. As months went by, I watched my granddaughter build her new life. She'd call me on Sundays, telling me about her job, her dreams, her husband. I became her secret advisor, her storyteller. Sometimes she'd say, "Grandpa, I wish I'd known you sooner." And I'd answer, "Life brings us together when the time is right." But time doesn't stop for anyone. A year later, I started feeling weaker. My hands shook more, and my walks became shorter. I didn't tell anyone. I just wanted to live whatever time I had left in peace. One winter morning, I wrote a letter, one for my son, one for my granddaughter. I sealed them in envelopes and kept them by my bedside. I knew one day they'd read them and understand everything I couldn't say aloud. One afternoon, my son came to visit me unexpectedly. He said, "Dad, we're having a family dinner tonight. Everyone's coming. Please, you have to be there." I hesitated, but his hopeful eyes made me agree. That night, I sat at their big dining table surrounded by laughter, warmth, and love. The same home that once closed its doors to me now felt like heaven itself. After dinner, my granddaughter played a song on the piano, an old tune her grandmother used to love. I closed my eyes and saw her face in the melody. My heart swelled with peace. When the music stopped, I whispered, "It's beautiful, just like her." My son placed his hand on mine, and for the first time in years, there was nothing left to say. Just silence, soft and complete. Days turned into weeks, and one morning, as the sun rose, I didn't wake up. I was still, calm, smiling. The letter I had written lay beside me.
My son found it later that day.
It said, "My dear son, don't cry for me. I didn't die lonely. I died a father who is loved again." Life isn't about how long we live, but about the moments that remind us we were never truly forgotten. Take care of your family. Tell them you love them every day. At my funeral, my granddaughter spoke through tears. She said, "My grandpa didn't come back to make us sad. He came back to teach us love, forgiveness, and the power of returning home." My son cried silently, his hand resting on my old hat, the same one I wore when I arrived at her wedding. After everyone left, he sat beside my grave and said, "I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it." And maybe, just maybe, the wind that brushed past him carried my voice, gentle and peaceful, saying, "I know, son. I always knew." From that day forward, every time my granddaughter saw a falling star, she'd whisper, "That's Grandpa saying hello." And every time my son sat alone at night, he'd look at the sky, smile faintly, and feel the warmth of the man he once thought he lost. Because love never really leaves. It just waits, quietly, for the moment we're ready to believe in it again. Months passed after my departure from this world, yet my presence lingered in quiet corners of their hearts. My son kept my chair at the dining table exactly as it was. Sometimes, he'd pour a cup of tea and leave it there, untouched, whispering, "For you, Dad." My granddaughter would visit every Sunday, bringing flowers to my grave, telling me about her life, how her husband was kind, how they planned to name their first child after me. She'd sit there for hours, laughing, crying, and saying, "I know you're listening, Grandpa." And perhaps in some unseen way, I was. Life moved forward as it always does. But something had changed in my family. They became closer. My son never missed a single family dinner again. He called his children every morning before work, telling them he loved them. He'd say, "Never let silence become the language of your home." I learned that too late. And though his voice trembled when he said it, it carried truth. Years later, when my granddaughter had her first baby, she visited my resting place again. She held the tiny child in her arms and said softly, "This is Michael. Michael, meet your great-grandpa." A small wind brushed across her face, and she smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. The circle of life had closed, beautifully, gently, as if the universe itself was whispering, "Everything comes home in time." In their house, a photo of me now hung on the wall, the same picture taken at the wedding, with my son's arm around my shoulder. Below it, my granddaughter had written one simple line, "He came back not for forgiveness, but for love." Guests would often ask who I was, and my son would smile and say, "That's my father, the bravest man I ever knew." He'd tell them the story, how a father who was once forgotten found his way back, how love healed what time had broken. And every time he told it, his voice would soften, his eyes would shine, because it wasn't just my story anymore. It was theirs. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he'd wake up and swear he could hear my voice, faint, gentle, saying, "You did good, son." You did good. He'd smile in the dark, whispering, "Thanks, Dad," before drifting back to sleep. My granddaughter grew older, stronger, wiser. She wrote about me in her journal, pages filled with lessons she said she learned from a man she barely knew but somehow loved deeply. She wrote, "He taught me that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about setting your heart free." That line became her mantra, her way of living. She taught it to her children and they to theirs. Decades passed, generations changed, but the story never died. It was told again and again, by firesides, over dinner tables, through laughter and tears. The old man who returned after 9 years became more than memory. He became a symbol of grace, a reminder that it's never too late to come home. And if, by some quiet miracle, you ever find yourself standing at the edge of regret, afraid to turn back, remember this story. Remember the man who thought he was forgotten but found his family waiting, hearts still open, love still alive. Because love, real love, doesn't fade with time. It just waits patiently for you to return. So when you feel lost, when the world turns its back, when the people you love forget your name, keep walking. Even if it takes 9 years or a lifetime, one day, the door will open. Someone will whisper your name, and you'll know you are never truly alone. Maybe that's all life really is, a long road that always, somehow, leads us back home. Years slipped away like quiet whispers. The seasons changed, and the world moved on, but in every corner of that family's home, my presence was still alive, not in the way of ghosts, but in the way of love that refuses to fade. My old pocket watch still sat on the mantel, ticking softly. My sun never wounded up again, yet it seemed to tick on its own, steady, patient, eternal. Sometimes, late at night, my granddaughter's little boy would wake up and say, "Mom, I saw an old man in my dream. He was smiling." She would smile back and whisper, "That's your great-grandpa, sweetheart. He watches over us." And maybe she was right. Maybe love finds a way to visit, even from beyond time. As years turned into decades, the family grew. New faces, new voices, new laughter filling the halls where once there had been silence. My son grew old too, his hair white like mine once was. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sunset, he said to his wife, "You know, I used to think my dad came back to make peace with me. But now I think he came back to teach me how to live." His wife smiled, resting her hand on his.
"He did," she said.
"He taught us all." When my son finally took his last breath, he was surrounded by love, his children, his grandchildren, holding his hands, telling him he'd been the best father they could have asked for. As he closed his eyes, he whispered softly, "Dad, I'm coming home." And somewhere, in a place beyond pain and time, I was waiting. I saw him walking toward me through a field of light, no longer tired, no longer burdened by guilt. Just my boy again, the one who once ran through the yard laughing, calling, "Dad, wait for me." I opened my arms, and he came running. We embraced, and everything the world had ever broken was whole again. No more years between us, no more regret, just peace, endless and pure. And there, beside the quiet river of eternity, we sat, father and son, watching over the family we had built. Below us, the world spun on, and our descendants carried our story forward. They told it to their children, how forgiveness can save a soul, how love never truly dies, and how every goodbye in this world is only the start of another hello somewhere else. Sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees near the family's old home, someone will pause and say, "Did you hear that?" It's like someone just sighed. And the others will smile knowingly. because deep down they understand it's us. Still there. Still watching. Still loving. So if you ever feel forgotten, if you ever feel like too much time has passed, remember our story. Remember that no distance is too far, no silence too long, no heart too broken for love to find its way back. One day, you'll look back and see that every pain, every loss, every tear was leading you home. Because love, real love, doesn't end. It transforms. It grows. It waits. It forgives. And when the world goes quiet, it whispers the same promise to every soul that ever dared to love. You are never alone. You are never too late. You are always loved. And that is how a forgotten father became the heartbeat of a family that finally learned what love truly means. Years have turned into almost a century now. The old house where it all began still stands at the edge of a quiet town. The walls have been painted many times, the garden replanted by new hands, yet the spirit inside remains untouched. Every corner whispers stories of laughter, tears, and the kind of love that never dies. My great-granddaughter now lives there, a gentle woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She never met me or my son, but she feels us. She once said to her husband, "Sometimes, when I walk into the living room, it feels like someone's there watching over me, like a warmth I can't explain." He smiled and said, "That's what love does. It stays even when people don't." One evening, she sat down with her children and opened a dusty wooden box passed down through generations. Inside were letters, photographs, and the pocket watch, still ticking softly after all these years. Her little boy asked, "Who are they, Mom?" She smiled and said, "That's your great-great-grandfather. He once came back to his family after 9 years apart. His love changed everything." She began to read aloud one of the letters, my letter. My voice, my words echoed through time. If you're reading this, it means our story lived on. Take care of your family. Never let pride steal the moments that matter. Love is the only thing worth returning for. As she read, tears shimmered in her eyes, and her children listened in silence. That night, she wrote a note of her own and placed it beside mine in the box. It said, "We remember you. We always will." As the years kept flowing, our story became more than just family history. It became a lesson shared in schools, a tale told by grandparents to remind their grandchildren that forgiveness can rebuild worlds. In that same town, near the churchyard, people sometimes leave flowers on a simple grave marked only with 2 words, "He returned." No dates, no titles, just that. Those who don't know the story still stop to wonder what it means. But those who do smile quietly, whispering, "He came back for love." Sometimes, when the wind moves softly through the tall trees near that grave, the leaves rustle in rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. And those who stand there say they can feel something, a calm presence, a warmth that wraps around the soul. Maybe that's me. Maybe that's us. Because love, once given, becomes eternal. If you listen closely, you might even hear a whisper. Don't wait too long to forgive. Don't wait too long to go home. And maybe that's the message I came back to leave behind, that every broken bond can be mended, every lost heart can be found, and every goodbye can still become a beginning again. So to whoever hears this story, wherever you are, if you're holding on to regret, let it go.
Call your family.
Say the words you've been afraid to say. Don't wait 9 years. Don't wait for time to run out.
Go home now.
Because someday, someone might be waiting at the door, hoping to hear your voice again. And when that day comes, when the door finally opens and love finds its way back, remember this old man's story. The one who was rejected by his children, disappeared for 9 long years, and returned only to remind the world that love never leaves. It only waits for us to return. As the years drifted further into memory, our story became part of the town itself. People didn't just remember the man who returned after 9 years. They felt his presence in every act of kindness, in every family that chose love over pride. My great-great-granddaughter would walk through the market, and strangers would smile at her without knowing why. Maybe it was something in her eyes, the same quiet strength that had once carried me through storms of loneliness. She didn't speak much about the past, but she carried it like a hidden song in her heart. Sometimes, at night, she would sit on her porch and tell her children stories. Not from books, but from life. She'd say, "There was a man who made mistakes, who lost everything he loved, but he never stopped loving. And one day, love brought him home." Her children would listen wide-eyed, and one of them would always ask, "Was he real?" And she'd smile, looking up at the stars. "More real than you'll ever know." Generations continued to grow. The old town became a city, filled with lights and noise, but deep in the heart of that busy place still stood the same little churchyard. And every year, on the anniversary of my return, families from all around would come together to share meals, forgive old grudges, and start again. They called it Homecoming Day. It became a tradition, a time to go back, to call forgotten friends, to say the words people often wait too long to say. Even those who didn't believe in stories began to feel it, the pull of home, the urge to forgive. And sometimes, in the middle of laughter and music, someone would look toward the trees and swear they saw 2 figures standing in the sunlight, an old man and his grown son, smiling. Maybe they did. One winter evening, a young man named David sat alone by the fire. He was part of the same bloodline, though many generations removed. He had grown distant from his father, repeating the same mistakes of pride that once tore our family apart. His mother had told him the story of the man who returned, but he never really believed it. Until that night, the wind outside howled, and as he stared into the flickering flames, he saw the shape of 2 faces in the fire, one old, one young. For a moment, they looked right at him. A voice whispered softly, "Don't wait too long, son." He jumped to his feet, heart pounding. The room felt alive with warmth, the kind that wraps around you like love itself. The next morning, David drove 6 hours across the state to his father's house. He stood outside for a long time, just staring at the front door. Then slowly he knocked. His father opened it, shocked, tears already in his eyes. "Dad," David said, his voice trembling, "I'm sorry." His father pulled him in without a word, hugging him tightly. That embrace, that single moment, healed a wound that had lived for years. Later that night, as David sat with his father laughing and sharing stories, he looked at an old photo on the wall, a black and white picture of a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Who's that?" he asked. His father said softly, "That's the one who started it all. That's the man who came back." David felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he understood that love wasn't just an emotion. It was a legacy. Something passed down through time, binding every generation together. That night, as he went to bed, he whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." And somewhere, in a place beyond time and distance, I whispered back, "You're welcome, my son." Years continued to unfold, like pages in a never-ending book. The story of our family became a quiet legend, told not just in words but in actions, in every father who forgave, in every child who returned, in every home that opened its door again. The world outside changed. New technology, new cities, new lives. But one thing remained the same, the heartbeat of love that refuses to die. And even now, As the stars look down on the earth each night, maybe one of them carries my name, shining softly over the town where it all began. Sometimes, when the wind passes through the trees, if you close your eyes, you might hear it, a whisper, a reminder. Go home.
Say sorry. Forgive.
Love. Because in the end, that's all that matters. Not the years you lived, not the mistakes you made, but the love you left behind. I was rejected once. I was forgotten. But I came back, and that return became the bridge between what was broken and what was whole. So, if you're listening to this story, maybe it isn't just mine. Maybe it's yours too. Maybe you are the one who needs to return, or maybe the one who needs to forgive. Either way, love is waiting, patient, silent, eternal. All you have to do is go back, knock on that door, and whisper, I'm home. And when you do, you'll understand what I learned too late, that no distance, no silence, no time can ever destroy the bond of a heart that still remembers. Because real love doesn't end. It waits, just like I did, for you to come home. Years later, when the seasons had changed countless times and new generations had filled the town with laughter, the story of the man who returned was still alive, passed from lips to hearts, carried in the warmth of families that once were broken but now whole again. The world had changed. Technology filled every home. Faces glowed behind screens, and people spoke more through messages than through eyes. But even in this new world, there remained a quiet longing for the things that could not be replaced. A young woman named Lily lived in a small apartment overlooking the same river where my son once stood waiting for me. She worked long hours, chasing dreams that paid bills but starved her heart. Her phone was always buzzing, her friends always online, yet she felt utterly alone. One night, unable to sleep, she scrolled through an old website of town archives and stumbled upon a faded story titled The Man Who Came Back After 9 Years. She read every word, slowly, as if she could hear my voice whispering each line. When she reached the end, tears rolled down her cheeks. Something in her heart stirred, a forgotten ache for her own father whom she hadn't spoken to in years after one painful argument that ended with silence. She closed her laptop, grabbed her coat, and drove through the empty streets toward her childhood home. The lights were still on. Her father was sitting on the porch, reading a book. When he saw her car pull up, he froze, disbelief covering his face. Lily stepped out, her breath visible in the cold night air. She couldn't speak. All the words she'd practiced vanished. So she did the only thing she could. She ran to him and hugged him tightly. Her father broke into tears, whispering her name over and over. The years between them melted away in that single moment. Later that night, as they sat by the fire, Lily told him about the story, my story, and how it found her. Her father smiled softly, eyes wet. Funny thing, he said, my grandfather used to tell me that same story when I was a boy. And in that moment, both of them realized they were part of the same bloodline, connected by the same endless thread of forgiveness that had begun long before they were born. Generations later, Lily's great-grandson became a writer. He didn't know the full truth of where his inspiration came from, but he often found himself writing about people who returned, people who made mistakes, disappeared, and came back changed. His stories touched millions around the world, inspiring people to reach out, to reconnect, to heal. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of his soul, maybe my voice still whispered through his words. The house where I once stood is gone now, replaced by a new home built on the same ground. But every spring, a small wildflower blooms exactly where I used to sit waiting for my son. No one planted it, but it returns every year, soft, simple, beautiful. People call it the Father's flower. They say if you stand near it and close your eyes, you can feel peace, the kind that only comes from forgiveness. In another part of the country, far from the old town, an old man lies in a nursing home. He's quiet most days, his mind fading between now and yesterday. But sometimes, when the sun hits his window just right, he whispers words that make no sense to the nurses. "I came back," he says, smiling faintly. "And they forgave me." They don't know what he means, but in his heart, he's back there again, standing in that wedding hall, seeing his children speechless, his granddaughter smiling at him like he was a hero. That memory never left him. It became eternity for him. And maybe that's how all stories like this end, not with fame or applause, but with quiet peace. The kind that fills your chest when you finally let go of everything that hurt you and everything you hurt. Life doesn't give second chances easily, but when it does, you have to take them because they might never come again. If you're hearing this now, somewhere in your heart, you already know what you need to do. Maybe there's someone you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe pride has built a wall between you.
But walls can fall.
Doors can open. Hearts can heal. All it takes is one step, one call, one message, one "I'm sorry." And when you do, you might discover that the person on the other side was waiting all this time, just like I was. Waiting for you to come home. Because home isn't just a place. It's a feeling, a heartbeat that stays alive even when everything else fades. And no matter how far you go, or how many years pass, love always finds a way to bring you back. And maybe one day, someone will tell your story. A story about how you returned, how you forgave, how you found peace again. And that story, like mine, will live on, whispered from one generation to the next, reminding the world that love, once lost, can still be found. So, if you're listening, don't wait 9 years.
Don't let silence win. Go back.
Knock on the door. Let love in. Because once you do, everything changes forever. Time moved like wind, unseen but always felt. Years passed, decades even, and the world continued to rush forward. Cities grew louder, lights brighter, but somewhere between the noise, people still whispered the same old story. About a father who came back, about a family that healed, about the love that refused to die. One evening, in a modern cafe filled with screens and silent conversations, a young man named Ethan sat alone, scrolling endlessly on his phone. He was successful, admired, and yet hollow inside. He had followers but no real friends. Somewhere deep within, he carried a quiet anger toward his own father, a man who had left years ago, choosing work over family, money over memories. Ethan had sworn never to forgive him. But one night, something unexpected happened. As he scrolled through social media, a short documentary popped up, The Man Who Came Back After 9 Years. The title caught his attention. He clicked it out of boredom, but as the soft voice narrated the story, he froze. Every word felt personal, every emotion familiar. When the narrator said, "Don't wait 9 years. Don't let silence win," Ethan's chest tightened. He paused the video, staring blankly at the reflection of his own face in the black screen. The next morning, he packed his car and drove 6 hours to the small town where his father now lived. He didn't know what he would say. He didn't even know if his father would open the door. But he went anyway, because something inside him whispered, "Go home." When he reached the old wooden house, he saw his father sitting by the porch, frail, older than he remembered. Their eyes met, and for a moment time stopped. No words were spoken. Ethan walked closer, his heart pounding like thunder. His father stood up slowly, his hands trembling. "Ethan," he said softly, his voice breaking, "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." And then, just like that, Ethan broke. The years of anger, silence, and pride collapsed all at once. He hugged his father tightly, crying like a child. The man who had once walked away now held his son, as if afraid to let go. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. It was love finding its way back through broken pieces. That night, they sat together by the fire, sharing stories they never thought they'd tell. The silence that had divided them turned into a bridge made of forgiveness. Ethan's father took out an old photo, a black and white portrait of a man with gentle eyes. "This," he said, "is our ancestor, the first man who came back." Ethan stared at it quietly. The eyes in the picture looked just like his. In that moment, he realized something deeper, that every generation carries the same choice: to hold on to pain or to let it go, to walk away or to return. And when one person chooses love, it echoes for centuries. Years later, Ethan wrote a book called The Return. It became a global bestseller. Readers from all over the world wrote letters, saying it made them call their parents, visit their old homes, or forgive someone they thought they never could. The story became a movement, not about one man, but about everyone who ever needed to come back. In classrooms, teachers read it to children. In churches, preachers spoke about it during sermons. Even in prisons, inmates found hope through its words. The story had become more than a story. It was a lifeline for lost souls. And maybe that's how legacy truly works. It isn't about names written in history books. It's about hearts that keep beating because of one act of courage, one word of love, one moment of forgiveness. One summer evening, long after Ethan had grown old, he sat under the same tree where his father once waited. The sky was painted in gold, and the wind was soft against his face. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I understand now. I came back too." Somewhere beyond the horizon, in the quiet hum of eternity, I smiled. The circle was complete. What started as one man's return had become a river, flowing endlessly through generations, healing every heart it touched. So, if you're still listening, and there's someone out there you miss, someone you've pushed away, don't wait. Because every moment you spend apart is a moment love could have been healing you. Life doesn't promise tomorrows. It only offers now. Pick up the phone. Drive the distance. Knock on the door. Say the words. Because one day, when time takes everything else, love will be the only thing that remains. And maybe someday someone will tell your story too. How you came back, how you were forgiven, how you made someone's heart whole again. Because that's what this story was always about. Not me, not my children, but love finding its way home, again and again, forever. Years passed quietly. Ethan had grown frail, his hair silver, his steps slower. But his heart, that old, loyal heart, still carried the same rhythm that had guided his family for generations. Every morning, he'd walk to the same riverside bench, the one his ancestors once sat on, and he'd whisper their names softly into the wind, names of those who came before, who forgave, who returned. He would sit there until the sun touched the horizon, feeling the warmth on his skin like an embrace from all the souls that once called this place home. One evening, as the sky burned orange and gold, Ethan felt something deep inside him shift, not pain, not fear, just peace. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I'm ready." The breeze lifted around him gently, almost playfully, like invisible hands brushing through his hair. And in that moment, he saw them, all of them. His father, his grandfather, and the man who started it all, standing together beneath the old oak tree, smiling at him with eyes full of love. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them was louder than words, filled with every apology ever made and every forgiveness ever given. Ethan smiled back, tears slipping down his wrinkled cheeks. Then, slowly, the light around him grew brighter, softer, until the world faded into a warm, endless glow. When the townspeople found him the next morning, he was sitting peacefully on the bench, a faint smile still resting on his lips. In his hands was a small note, folded neatly, with just 3 words written on it. I came home. At his funeral, people from all over came, families, friends, strangers who had read his book or heard his story. They filled the little church until there was no room left to stand. The preacher said, "This man didn't just live, he taught the world how to return. He showed that love never dies, it only waits." Outside, the river flowed quietly, reflecting the light of the afternoon sun. And then something magical happened. A soft breeze swept through the churchyard, carrying a cluster of wildflowers, the same kind that had grown where the first man once sat waiting. The petals danced through the air, landing gently on Ethan's coffin, as if nature itself was saying goodbye. In the years that followed, a memorial bench was placed there with a simple inscription, "The man who taught the world to come home." Visitors from around the country would sit there, often in silence, some crying, some smiling. Many said they felt a strange calm, as if the air itself carried peace. And that's how the story continued, long after the last page had been written. Parents began telling their children about the return. Schools held an annual homecoming day where people wrote letters to those they'd lost touch with. Even television hosts mentioned it, how one story changed countless lives. Somewhere in a city thousands of miles away, a young boy once asked his mother, "Is it true, Mom? Can people really come back after so long?" She smiled gently, brushing his hair back. "Yes, baby," she said softly. "If love still remembers, then no distance is too far and no time is too late." That boy grew up to become a filmmaker. Years later, he made a movie inspired by Ethan's book. The film was called Homecoming, the story that never ends. It won awards, broke hearts, and healed millions. During the premiere, as the audience sat in tears, the boy, now a man, stood on stage and said, "This story began long before me. It began with a man who returned. I just carried his light forward." And maybe that's what eternity truly is, not golden gates or endless skies, but the light we pass from one soul to another, the love we refuse to bury, the forgiveness that never stops echoing. Some nights, when the stars are bright enough, you can still feel them, all those souls who came back. They're not ghosts or memories. They're whispers in the wind, guiding lost hearts home again. And maybe tonight, one of them is whispering to you. Maybe this story found you for a reason. Maybe it's not just a story at all. Maybe it's a sign, because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for your knock on the door, your message, your voice saying, "I forgive you," or "Please come home." Don't let the years pass. Don't let pride steal your peace. Because in the end, time will fade, bodies will age, but love will still be standing at the door, waiting. And when you finally return, when you open that door and see forgiveness in their eyes, you'll realize something powerful. You were never truly lost. You were just on your way home. And in that moment, like every soul before you, you'll finally whisper the words that echo through generations, the same words written on Ethan's note, the same words that began it all. "I came home,